So let's get back maybe to Eliyahu Navi. I just want to mention again that when we spoke about this piece that Reb Yaakov wrote up after he had a plane ride with Yerucham Meshel, Ish Imovov Tirov Shapsosai Tishmoru, I showed that the fellow who published the Chumash, who's a great Talmud Chacham, by the way, wrote that that's Al Pi Drash, and Reb Yaakov had told me it's Al Pi Pshat. And then Wayne Colvin, Pinchas, who got the new Reb Yaakov, it seems, like there's a new Reb Yaakov Sefer with many additions. So even if Max has it already. Wow.
No, it wasn't me. It wasn't me.
Oh, who was it?
Somebody else.
Max? Oh, Max, you're the one who wrote me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I made a mistake. Sorry. I don't know why I confused that. But maybe it's age. But
it's because I reacted to it when I saw it.
I mean, okay. Oh, so Max, actually, when did you buy the Sefer? What?
You have to
I don't hear you.
Max. Unmute Max.
I just got it like in the last week or two.
Okay. So in that Sefer, he doesn't exactly correct it, but he doesn't call it Drash anymore, and he explains why Reb Yaakov said what he said, because why do you speak about Shabbos? You could speak about any mitzvah. You could speak about kashrus. Ishav imov tirov lo tavashel gediba chalivimo, right? So Reb Yaakov called that pshat, but the fellow who published Max this Sefer or republished it, he still doesn't say that Reb Yaakov saying it al pi pshat. Am I correct? He doesn't say that part because he's still afraid to say that Reb Yaakov is pshat and what the Gemara said is drash. Don't ask me why, but for some reason he's still afraid to say that. But at least he corrected it to an extent, so that's important. Okay, so let's go through the piece on Eliyahu, because Eliyahu is also a piece that's from last week. I don't know if I have the page numbers here, but from last week it was page Kuf Ayin Aleph in Sefer Malachim, and it was Pasuk Malachim Bet Aleph Pasuk Yud Vayanel Eliyahu Vayedaber, right? So Reb Yaakov already said that in the Sefer. In Malachim, getting Malachim Beis, Eliyahu is called 4 times Eliyah and not Eliyahu. Okay, the 5th time, everybody agrees, is in Malachi. Okay, and I mentioned to you last week that about that Malachi that Rabbi Yaakov liked a certain siddur called Avodas Yisrael. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but you can get it. It's one of the cheapest siddurim you can get. And in there, the fellow, Reb Yaakov didn't call him rabbi for some reason. He called him Beer, because his name was Reb Yitzchak Beer. He was a huge Talmud Chacham in Germany, I think in the 1700s. And in page 9 that I gave you, I actually photocopied the piece where at the end of Birchas Hamazon, when he quotes the Rachamons, he says, Harachamon yishlach lanu et Eliyah hanavi, Zachor Latov, and not Eliyahu, which I mentioned is the only time I've ever seen that in a bencher is the United Synagogue, a United Synagogue bencher in England. I saw that. I don't know if anyone has a bencher like that, but I had one because I went to a wedding that had a United Synagogue close to, I think it was 46 years ago I went to the wedding. I forget the name of the fellow, but he was learning in the Chappelle's Kollel, and he got married. And he gave me, he gave out benchers, and I was like mispulled to see that the bencher said Eliyah and not Eliyahu. But I can't find the bencher. Somehow or another, it must have gotten put into the shameless after many years. But he writes Eliyah, Arachamana Yishlach Lanu Eliyahu, and in the bottom he says, right, there's a nusach that's the correct nusach is Eliyah because that's what it says in Malachi. Okay, that's just a side issue. So that's the first part that Reb Yaakov goes through, saying that there's 4 places in Malachim. The Targum Yonason has one place different than what we have, but it's still 4 places because there's another place where we have Eliyahu. He has Eliyahu, right? Now, I want to proceed by saying the Medrash does not answer up why these 5 places are Eliyahu is called Eliyah. Okay, he doesn't really answer. He just says there's 5 places, and the Medrash says Yaakov is mentioned with a vav, right? 5 places, and the drash is that Yaakov took the vav of Eliyahu so he would return. He took it as an arvon. He took it as a mashkon that he would return. Okay, now, so on page Kufayim Beis of last week, in the second paragraph, Reb Yaakov says, "Aval anaseh al pi pshuto." I'm going to answer this according to the pshat, which is very interesting because things with vavs, without vavs, usually we look at that as very Kabbalistic. Like, when does Yirmiyahu have Yirmiyah, right? We look at that more like Kabbalistic, God's names. Right? We never try to answer up why they use this name or that name, al pi pshat, so much. It's more like al pi drash or al pi Kabbalah. But Reb Yaakov tries to answer al pi Kabbalah. Okay, after I'm going to introduce a general hagdama. Now, we learned part of this, so we'll go through it quick, but I will stop at certain points. I mentioned to you...
You're on Kufayim Beit right now?
Kufayim Bet, right. You see that? Kufayim Bet, the second paragraph, 4 lines in. Does everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Wayne, you see that?
4 lines in.
To the new paragraph. V'hine, 4 lines in. V'hu.
Yeah.
Okay. V'hu matzinu b'mesechet Avos, Perak Aleph, Mishnah Aleph, Moshe Kibbel Torah Misina, V'yishul Eskenim, Leviim Masul Anshe Knes HaGdola, V'hine mihem haskenim, Shenimsa Torah Alideim Leneviim. So we had the Rashi at the beginning of Sefer Shmuel that seems to say that the Skenim who gave to Nevi'im were the Shoftim. I said that the Rambam disagrees. If you look at the Hagdomel to the Yarech HaZokah, the Rambam disagrees. And I'm much more comfortable with the Rambam, I have to tell you, because to say that, these Shoftim, certain Shoftim were the Mosrei HaTorah, which you're going to see the names in a minute, I have a hard time believing that. So the Rambam doesn't have the Shoftim as the Mosrei HaTorah, and it's easier. It fits a little bit easier into my heart, so to speak. But here, look what he says. Who are these people that got it from Yeshua and gave it to the Nevi'im? V'yanti ba'damas pirish machzor vitri lemesechet avos. Okay, I mentioned this already once. There's a sefer called Machzor Vitri. Now it's called Machzor Vitri because the fellow Reb Simcha was a Talmud of Rashi, right? Reb Simcha Reb Shmuel, I think his name was. He was a Talmud of Rashi, and he wrote a Machzor. Handwritten. And we have a lot of our Ashkenazi customs from that Machzor. Okay, so he's always called the Machzor Vitri, even though besides that, he wrote a chart of who was Makabel the Torah from who. Okay, and he says like this, and Reb Yaakov uses it. Where this Machzor Vitri appears? It appears in the Mishnayos, Vilna Mishnayos, at the end of Masechta Avos. Now, I don't know, people don't buy the Vilna Mishnayos anymore. It's not so stylish, but this is the way. You can't even see it. Well, I don't know why it doesn't show up.
Farther away.
Oh, farther away. Oh, maybe you're right. Oh, that's it. You're right. So this Mishnayos with the Rav and the Tosfos Yontif.
The traditional one.
What?
It's the traditional
classic
one
that nobody uses anymore because now they have the Kahati and now they have the Art Scroll. So they don't really use it so much anymore. But it's really that's the one that Reb Yaakov used. Of course, he saw the Machzor Vitri as well. And by the way, the Machzor Vitri, his son married Rashi's granddaughter. So he was not only a Talmud, he was like a shtikla mechutin to Rashi. Did anyone ever see on the Shas Gittin and Kedushin, and maybe it's on the Masechtas? I remember on Gittin for sure. Is it on Kedushin too? Yeah, I think so. Rihazokin. On the side of the daf, there's Rihazokin. It's very tiny, and if you look at it, you'll probably need glasses at one point, right? But he has very interesting stuff, the Rihazokin. Take a look at the. It has to be your regular Shas, right? He was born out of that shidduch between Rabbeinu Simcha's son and Rashi's granddaughter. They had the Rihazokin as one of the Bali Tosfos, just so you know the background. So he quotes here, Pirish Machzer Vitri L'Masechet Avos Shehu V'Seder Makabli Torah Al Pi Seder Tanoim V'Amoraim. It's called over there Seder Makabli Torah, but he goes past the Pirkei Avos. He goes into the Amoraim as well. V'Hu Yoshua L'Skenim Skenim L'Osniel V'Osniel L'Ehud L'Shamgar L'Dvoru Barak L'Gidon L'Avimelech. Now, anyone who knows Sefer Shoftim, there's no way that Avimelech could have been one of the most Torah. He was a Russia Marusha. I don't understand it, but this is what he says. L'Tola, L'Yair, Agiladi, L'Pinchas, L'Yiftach. Right? By the way, he says L'Dvoru Barak. By Devora, he mentions Barak too. Even though Devora is obviously bigger, she was in Neviah, right? But he makes them into a tag team. I don't know. It seems he doesn't want a woman alone being Makabel Torah. I guess. I don't even know. But he says, all of a sudden, he mentions two over there. L'Gidon, Avimelech, L'Tola, L'Yair, HaGiladi, L'Pinchas, which is interesting. Pinchas is living at that time. We know from Sefer Shoftim, he appears in Sefer Shoftim. L'Yiftach, L'Ivtzan, Ivtzan is Boaz, L'Elon, L'Avdon, L'Manoach, L'Shimshal, L'Elkanah, L'Eli, L'Shmuel, L'Gad, L'Shmaya, L'Eidu, L'Achia, Shiloni, V'chule. Okay? There's something very strange about this. I don't know. Over here, it's missing, when you quote it here, it's missing Nasan, Hanavi. Okay, and Reb Yaakov is going to talk about Nasan Hanavi over here as being one of the Makabelei Torah. Okay, but it says L'Eli L'Shmuel L'Gad, right? God was one of the vehement time of David HaMelech, but he's missing over here Nasan. But I checked in the Machzor Vitri. Someone says it's a mistake, and there should be Nasan in here before God. Or God before Nasan. I don't remember. Maybe it's God before Nasan. But he should be here. I mean, Reb Yaakov quotes this Machzor Vitri without Nasan, which is very strange to me. Very clearly, the Machzor Vitri holds like Rashi, his Rebbe, that the Skenim in that Mishnah that says that Yoshua gave it to the Skenim, gave it to the Nevi'im, that it is the Shoftim. That's why they called Skenim and not Shoftim. Rabbi Yaakov says, why are they called Skenim? Because here we're not talking about them being leaders of the Jewish people. We're talking about them being Makabelei Torah, right? And of course, you need to be a Zaken, Zeshakana Chachma, Ukmoshe B'yarti M'makam Acher, like I explained in a different place. And we'll see that different place at a different point. And here you have to be Medayik by Reb Yaakov, that they were appointed to establish the kingdom of Torah to Israel. Okay? In other words, there wasn't supposed to be a king. The Shoftim was supposed to establish God was supposed to be the king. And the Torah was supposed to be the king. In other words, God and God's Torah was supposed to be the kings. We'll talk a lot about this in Rabbi Yaakov found Rabbi Yehuda Halevi that learns Pshat in the text this way in Sefer Shoftim. We'll talk about it at a different point, in 2 sessions probably from now, or the next session we'll talk about it. But Rabbi Yaakov says, what was the point of the Shoftim? Lamid mamleches haTorah b'Yisrael. To make sure that the Torah was spread in Klal Yisrael and that they should do things al pi Torah. V'chein yinog ad simas hamelech was nimser mesoros hakabbalah neviim. That's what we already learned. It was given to the neviim. K'fi hanira, This is the end of the page. Kfianira she'af al pi shahaisa hanevua mitzuya be'esahi. And here's Reb Yaakov comes with his yisod. Even though we find that nevuah was very widespread at this time, and there were a lot of neviim from the time of Shmuel. As you know, before Shmuel came, it says clearly in the text that there was very little nevuah. And it seems that Shmuel like reopened the whole thing, reopened the whole nevuah. He like burst out after Shmuel. He became a navi, and when he became a navi, nevuah once again started becoming very prominent in the Jewish people. Reb Yaakov is just going to quote psukim here in Sefer Shmuel and Malachim to show that nevuah was widespread and there were a lot of neviim. Okay, Kamatzinu Shmuel Aleph Yud Hey Ufagata Chevel Neviim. Right, in the time of Shmuel it says, and about Shol, you're going to meet a chevel of neviim. What is a chevel? A chevel is a string of neviim, right? Chevel is a string, a whole bunch. V'chein sham yutes chof la'akas neviim nibim. You see a whole la'aka, a whole symphony of neviim. V'chein sham chof ches vav v'yishal shol gam ba'urim gam neviim. Shol asked the neviim. So there were a lot of neviim. V'chein la'kamam beis gimel v'yetzu b'nei neviim. In Sefer Malachim, it says that the Bnei HaNeviim went out. Asher Beit El, they lived in Beit El. There was a bunch of Neviim in Beit El. Bnei HaNeviim Asher BeYericho. There was a bunch of Neviim, Bnei HaNeviim, in Yericho. Pasuk Zayim Chamishim Ish Mibnei HaNeviim. You see 550 Neviim. So we see throughout Sefer Shmuel and Sefer Malachim, there were tons of Neviim. Okay? We don't know who they are necessarily, and maybe they didn't receive prophecies, Ledorot, or any prophecies to say over. Haresha Yitzuvim Shamkach, Haresha Yimitzuyin, not Mitzuyin Sham Kach. Behold, that they were found thusly, meaning there were many of Nevi'im. So why do we have? So Reb Yaakov was really bothered with. So all these Nevi'im accepted the Torah? In other words, you had 50 Nevi'im Yericho. They were all part of the Mosrei Torah? Reb Yaakov is going to say, no. The Chevel HaNevi'im, La'akas HaNevi'im, they're not part of the Mosrei Torah. What is it? Mikol Makam, Kol Melech HaYimitya'etz B'Yanav Im Navi Miyuchad, Shalo HaYinavi HaUmah. There was one Navi called, he calls it here Navi HaUmah, I call it Navi HaMelech, right? It was an official position. He was the Navi HaMelech. He was the other side of the political spectrum. He was not the political side. He was the minister of religion, right? V'heimayum Bali Kabbalah. They were the Bali Kabbalah. The Navi HaMelech, they were the Bali Kabbalah. These other Nevi'im were Nevi'im, and they could be sitting and learning Torah, but they weren't part of the Masorah, right? They didn't belong to the Metzes Gedolei HaTorah, so to speak, right? Or the Metzes Chachmei Torah, Penjiv Ashkenazi or Sfaradi, right? V'heimo Yubali Kabbalah. Could Metzino b'Shmuel Bet Zayin Gimel Vayom Nosser El Melech Kol Asher B'Lvavcha Lechaseh. What is? We mentioned this, that David asked Nosson, should I build the Beis HaMikdash? Right? And he said, everything in your heart you should do. Go build the Beis HaMikdash. V'achar kach b'pasuk Daled V'hidvar Hashem El Nosson Lema. In other words, God told Nosson in a nevuah that he can't build the Beis HaMikdash. Shlomo has to build the Beis HaMikdash. Okay? But when he asked Nosson, right? He asked Nosson for an Eitzah, because he was the Navi HaUmah, right? V'hainu shemetchila noatz imo b'tar Talmud Chacham v'das Torah. In other words, he first went to Nosson not as a Navi, but as the Mosrei Torah, the Mekabel Torah, right? The Metchila Noatz Imo. Now notice Reb Yaakov very carefully wrote Noatz Imo. He was meya'etz with him. You know why? Because he couldn't. He's not asking him in a halacha here. Am I allowed to build the Beis HaMikdash? He's asking him, should I build the Beis HaMikdash? right? He asked him, so he gave him it. He told him, Das Torah says you should build it. But Tor Talmud Chacham v'Das Torah. Aval achar kach bo elav b'shem Hashem b'tor Navi. But then he got it. He got a nevuah b'tor Navi, and he'd have to tell David not. He'd have to tell David not to build a Beis Hamikdash. Now, I have to read you. Look down at the bottom, 5:15. Here, Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky hits the nail on the head. And this is something I heard from Reb Yaakov, so I want you to know about it, even though it's earth-shattering. Okay? I don't even know if you could tell it over to anybody, but we're going to say it over here. Okay?
It's in the book.
Right, it's in the book. But I don't know how many people read this book. But if they read the book, we're going to have a lot of trouble. Okay? Ulai Rabbeinu Dayak Bulshono Noetz Imo, Shoita Kan Hityatsut. Greda. There was only a question of hityatzut. Lafuke mipsak halacha kilu haya kan psak halacha haynu omrim loba hayinu omrim loba shamayim. V'lo haya bekoch shel nasin l'shanas l'macharas as psak dino machmas nevuah. In other words, if he was giving a psak halacha, right, then he can't change it because he got a nevuah. Because Torah lo b'shamayim, a Navi can't bring a halacha from Shamayim. So that's why Reb Yaakov is medayik, and he says he was miya'etz ito. Okay? Ulam b'tor Talmud Chacham v'das Torah ya'atz l'David HaMelech l'vnos Beis HaMikdash u'bazeh amar Rabbeinu b'zdamnut acheret. And here Reb Yaakov said at a different time, and I heard this from Reb Yaakov, Nosan HaNova ha'yochol lit'os Ki ein ze nevuah shechayevet liot emes. Nasan HaNavi could make a mistake in Das Torah when he told him to build a Beis Hamikdash. It's obvious from the text, by the way, right? He tells him to build it. The next day he gets a nevuah, and he comes. The next night he gets a nevuah. He tells David not to build it. So David should have said to him, "What were you thinking yesterday on Tuesday?" Right? You tell me on Wednesday not to. What were you thinking on Tuesday? Right?
He was thinking Das Torah.
Right? What?
He was thinking Das Torah.
Das Torah. And Reb Yaakov says, I'll be Das Torah, you can make a mistake. Okay? Now, if you say this over to somebody, in the Haredi world, you're finished.
You'll never get a shidduch for your daughter.
Right, exactly. And maybe even your granddaughter.
I think you're exaggerating a bit. I mean, like, everyone knows that Nevuah is higher than Das Torah.
That what?
Nevuah is higher than Das Torah.
100%. But they'll say that Das Torah can't be wrong, but Nevuah is even higher. You think they'll say Das Torah can actually be wrong? That maybe Rav Shach once made a mistake, Chas v'shalom?
I heard Rav Herschel Schachter say the same thing once, but I guess he's already, out.
He said Das Torah can make a mistake.
Yeah, he told a story from when he was a kid. He went to shul, and all the old men said it was Rosh Chodesh, but it wasn't Rosh Chodesh, and they davened they davened with Hallel and everything, and it wasn't Rosh Chodesh. And he said that whatever, he just used that as an example about how people can make mistakes and that things can happen. Same thing with kashrus. You go to a restaurant, you can't go to Shemayim and point to the Tudah and say, well, the Tudah said, he said, you're going to have to give, Anyway, he said that.
So look, but what I'm trying to say is like this. What Reb Yaakov is not saying is that necessarily the great posek, Reb Moshe Feinstein, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Reb Elyashiv, can make a mistake al pi halacha, even though there's room for that too. But he didn't say that. He said when they give an eitzah, where it's not a halacha, right? They give an eitzah, they could make a mistake. I once heard from Reb Aaron Soloveitchik. I asked him, I don't remember what the topic was. I asked him, Rav Shach had said something, and I said, how could Rav Shach have made a mistake? Because it seemed that what he said didn't turn out to be, what he thought would be. I don't remember what it was, but I asked Reb Aaron Soloveitchik, and he quoted me the Gemara in Gittin that says, Meishav Lev Chachamim Ocher. Right? So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai also made a mistake. He should have asked Yerushalayim. He said, Tein li yavne v'chachamel. So you see that sometimes God hides the eyes of the Talmud Chacham, and he doesn't say it right. Over here, it's very clear. This is not even like a case of Meishav Lev Chacham Ocher, because, why would God, make, cause Nosson to make a mistake. Pashtus, he made a mistake because Al Pi Das Torah, in other words, Al Pi Das Torah, he was right. What does it mean? He was not wrong, he was right. The cheshbon was correct. But God came along and said, yeah, your cheshbon is right, but it's wrong. Right? I have a different cheshbon. Lo machshavosecha machshavosai, right? That's what you have to say. But that's the way Reb Yaakov put it, that Al Pi Das Torah, you can make a mistake sometimes.
But
okay?
All you can prove from here is that you need a Navi to tell you it's a mistake.
Right. I didn't say I could prove it's a mistake, Jonathan. Jonathan, I didn't say I could prove it's a mistake, but sometimes we can. What do I mean? If, let's say, a rabbi said not to leave Europe before the Holocaust, right? A great rabbi I'm talking about, not just any rabbi, but a very great rabbi said, don't leave Europe before the Holocaust, and people were killed. So, I mean, we'd have to kvetch why he didn't make a mistake. What his calculation was. Pashtus, he made a mistake, I know people that told me that my mother told me that there were rabbis that said not to leave Europe and there's nothing going to happen, right? So Pashtus, again, you could say, there's already a precedent for that in Gemara Gittin, right? Or you could say that Reb Yaakov is saying, Al Pi Das Torah, you can make a mistake. There's such a thing, Even, by the way, Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky, his brother-in-law, my grandfather's brother-in-law, told him not to send his two oldest kids to America. When he goes to Canada, to Toronto, he should not take the two oldest kids who are already learning in yeshivas here, and there's no yeshiva in Toronto. And he was right, there was no yeshiva in Toronto. But who did they turn out to be? One of them was Reb Shmuel Kamenetsky. So he would have been killed. Okay, we could always say he would have been saved another way, maybe, right? But Pashtus, he was a little boy, he would have been killed. And Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky, who opened up one of the first yeshivas in the 5 towns, also he would have been killed. They would have been killed. So Rabbi Avram Grzinski was a great tzaddik. Nobody, Kuli Amalo Pligi, that the Torah Avram was a tremendous tzaddik. He became the menahel of Slobodka after the Alter of Slobodka came to Eretz Yisrael, right? But if you would have asked Reb Yaakov, I think Reb Yaakov would have said, yeah, my brother-in-law made a mistake. He didn't have for whatever reason, we don't know, I'm just saying the idea that, that he could make that a Talmud Chacham, a great Talmud Chacham, again, we're not talking about any Talmud Chacham, but the great Gedolei Torah can make mistakes. I think it's a rarity, but Reb Yaakov is leaving this part open. That's all I'm saying. This is a parenthetic statement, right? That Rabbi Yosef Kamenetsky feels he wants to put out there because we heard it from Reb Yaakov. Okay.
Was David HaMelech obligated to listen to Nassim even though he didn't ask for a nevuah with regards to it?
That's exactly what Reb Yaakov's point is. I'm glad you brought that up, Bar. In other words, he's saying he's the Navi HaMelech. That's why he went to ask him in the first place. David HaMelech was not a slouch, right? But he held he's not allowed to do anything in Klal Yisrael without asking the one in charge of Klal Yisrael. Right? The Navi Ha'umah. Right? That's exactly Reb Yaakov's point. Why would David have to ask him? If either David would ask him, go and get me a nevuah, right? That would make sense. But David's mityaetz with him because he's not allowed to do anything without asking anything for Klal Yisrael, anything big, he's not allowed to do without asking the Navi. That's what Reb Yaakov's trying to prove here. That's why he asked Nosson. And he gives another example. V'chein matzinu b'malachim aleph, chav zayin, she'amar Nosson leDavid k'dvar temua. Nosson says to David when he hears that that Adoniah is going to become the king. Imeis Adoniah melech niya davar hazev lo odate esavtecha miyeshev al kisei. If Adoniah was supposed to become king and you wanted to be king, you didn't tell your servant, he's referring to himself, you didn't tell your servant who's going to sit on the throne after you? In other words, Nosson comes to him and says, how could you not have told me this? David should answer him and says, I'm the king. You're not the king. I don't have to tell you. The answer is that you see that the relationship between the king and the Navi and the Navi Ha'umah, not every Navi, but the Navi Umah, the Bosrei, the Makabel Torah, he had to ask him, be mityaetz with him. Right? He had to be mityaetz with him. Any big thing, kingship, that you're going to build a Beis Hamikdash, these are big things, right? Right? We didn't build a Beis Hamikdash since the time we came into Israel. Right? That's 400 years. There was no Beis Hamikdash, which is very strange. Okay? But now you want to build it, you have to be mityaetz with the Navi to say it's the right time. The Navi said it's the right time, right? And by Shlomo and Adoniyahu, he said, how come you're not miyayetz? And then Ulufika chikbit Shmuel al Shaul. Why is Shmuel angry at Shaul? La'atzir she'af shenitman melech avul kafufu l'shilton haTorah. You are the king, but you are kafuf to the Shilton HaTorah, Reb Yaakov calls it, right? Meaning the rule of the Torah. He doesn't mean over here, he doesn't mean the Torah, the Taryag mitzvahs or Breishis Shmos V'Yikra Bamidbar Devarim. He means the Shilton HaTorah, meaning the one who's in charge of the Torah. And that's Nasan HaNavi or Shmuel HaNavi. Okay? That's his Agdama. Now he's going to answer up why Eliyah and Eliyahu. Okay? V'hine, Hatosis Bab Metzia Kuf Yedalit Amid Beis, Kosa, B'Shem Tshuvas Gaon. Tosis brings a tshuva from the Gaonic period. Sheyesh B'Seder Eliyahu Rabba She'amar Lahem. Eliyahu said to people, Eini Ela Mizaro Shel Rachel. I am from the children of Rachel. Amalei Tein Siman L'Dvarecha. So people said to him, give us a sign that you're the child from Rachel, you're from the Bnei Rachel. Who do we always say Eliyahu is from? Do you know? Anybody know what we say who Eliyahu is?
Pinchas.
Pinchas. Eliyahu is actually Pinchas, right? Eliyahu, that's what some Chazal say. Pinchas is Eliyahu, and definitely he's a Kohen, right? Now, if you remember this Gemara in Bava Metzia, the Amora finds Eliyahu in a Beit HaKfarot, a non-Jewish Beit HaKfarot, and he says to him, Eliyahu, you're a Kohen. So Eliyahu answers him and says, you never learned Taharos? A guy is not Matama, only b'maga, not be'oel. A guy is not Matama b'oel. That's what he tells him. So it sounds like he's a Kohen, because he says to the guy, he says to the Amora, didn't you learn Taharas? Right? A Kohen is not Matama b'oel, only b'maga, right? But Tosas over there says there's other opinions that say that Eliyahu is from the Bnei Rachel, and when they asked Eliyahu to give a siman, meaning show us where you come from, Eliyahu quotes the pasuk by Binyamin in Divrei Hayamim. That's over here. Amalei kach kosu b'yichusa shel Binyamin. It says v'yareshya the Eliyah, okay, Uzachariah, or maybe it's v'zichri. I guess it's zichri, right? Zichri. So what does Eliyahu say according to this medrash that the Gaonim quote? He says, you see that I'm from the children of Binyamin, because over there it's listing off the children, grandchildren of Binyamin, and he calls himself Eliyah. Okay? So Reb Yaakov says, wait a minute. His name is Eliyahu. Why are you calling him Eliyah? Right? By the way, this is not one of the times. Okay? This is not one of the 5 times, right? So he says, Rabbi Yaakov says, do you see from Divrei Hayamim that his name was not Eliyahu? It was Eliyah, because when it goes from the births of these people, the yichus of these people, he's called Eliyah, not Eliyahu. So that was the name given by his birth. Okay? When he became Navi Ha'umah, Shinu et Shemo Eliyahu. He got an extra letter, Eliyahu. Ukemoshe Kosav Rashbam Bamidbar Yud Gimel Tesayin. Shemoshe Korelo Shea Yoshua Shefkidu al Beso, right? Hoshea became Yoshua, because when someone goes up to Gedula, right, becomes the head of Klal Yisrael, or the Navi Shel Klal Yisrael, you get an extra vav. You get your name changes. Kamoke Nasa im Eliyahu Navi. Aval achash and esmana Elisha leNavi liYisrael. Kamoshe Kosev leEl Yutes Tezayin. In other words, what did God say to Eliyahu over there? At the end of Sefer Malachim Aleph, he says to him, and go appoint Elisha as a Navi instead of you. I don't want you anymore. Point Elisha. Oh, so what happened? He fired him and gave him pitzuim, right? He fired him, right? He said, you're not the Navi anymore. Now it's going to be Elisha's going to be the Navi. Oh, once he wasn't working as a head of the Jewish people, as head of state, as Navi Umah anymore, v'nikrahu al shem arisa so. Now he's called Eliyah below Vav. He's called Eliyahu below Vav because now he doesn't have the official position anymore. So that's why the 4 times here and the 5th time is in Malachi, which of course, if the 5th time is is when he comes back, right? And according to Reb Yaakov, he comes back as a private citizen. He doesn't come back as the Nevi Ha'umah, right? He comes back as a private citizen. Why? Because Reb Yaakov held there's a machlokes whether Eliyahu comes with Mashiach or after Mashiach or before Mashiach. Okay? In fact, I'm not so sure. I think the Rambam may bring the opinions at the end of Hilchos Malachim, right? And Reb Yaakov held that Eliyahu is coming back as Eliyah because he doesn't have that official position. Maybe when Mashiach comes, he'll be his Navi, and then he'll get the name Eliyahu again. But at this point, he's called Eliyah because he comes back. I remember Reb Yaakov saying this. He comes back as a private citizen. Why is he being sent? Whatever that means, that's why he's coming back. He's not coming back to be Nevi HaMelech because Melech Mashiach is not here yet. He comes there before Melech HaMashiach. Okay? You check the Rambam Hilchos Malachim. If I'm not mistaken, the Rambam quotes this opinion as well. Okay? But the point over here is that Reb Yaakov is answering Al Pi Pshat. Reb Yaakov using his idea of the Nevi Umah, right? When he was the Nevi Umah, he got the extra vav. That's the way we meet him, as the Nevi Umah. And when he lost his position, God fired him, took Elisha, he's back to his position. Now, to be fair, there's other times after this that he is called Eliyahu. Okay? There's other times. And Reb Yaakov is not nervous about that. Why? All Reb Yaakov wants to do is stress that right after that event, he's called Eliyah, not Eliyahu, to tell us that he's not in an official position anymore, and Elisha took the position. Now, according to the Medrash, it's the same problem. The Medrash never explains why these 5 times, right? The Medrash doesn't explain it, right? So Reb Yaakov doesn't have to be more religious than the Medrash, okay? In other words, Reb Yaakov is not explaining why these 5 times, even though the 5th time, both the Medrash and Reb Yaakov fit pretty well, that Eliyahu comes back without the Vav. For the Medrash, it means because Yaakov took his Vav, so now he's coming back without the Vav, right? Now he's coming back. Right, according to Reb Yaakov, he's coming back as a private citizen, and therefore he doesn't have the vav yet, because that was his name when he was born. That is the pshat that Reb Yaakov is giving over here. Okay, one second. We got time. Okay, before we start the Hagdama to Sefer Shoftim, which Reb Yaakov told over to Rav Soloveitchik, and when we learn it, I'll tell you over what happened with him and Rav Soloveitchik, at least partially. I decided to do another piece today, which is, another piece which I gave you. I gave you our 3 sheets on Parshas Chayei Sarah. Okay, why did I decide to do this? because this is another place where a status changes. Okay, Reb Yaakov takes up the challenge of Eliezer Eved Avraham. Okay, and he notices something that I never saw anyone else notice, and I appreciate if you saw other people, let me know what they say, because I never saw anyone else notice this. In the whole story about the shidduch, right? Eliezer sent for a shidduch, right? Now Reb Yaakov noticed that when he's first sent, he's called Eved Avraham, and at a certain point, all of a sudden he's called V'ha'ish, like 5-6 times in a row. And then it's reverted back to Eved. And Reb Yaakov wants to know what happened over here. Why is he called Eved at the beginning? Which that makes sense. He's Eved Avraham. He's an Eved. He's Eved Kanani, right? But why all of a sudden an Ish? And then once he's called Ish, he's called Eved again. That's Reb Yaakov's, what Reb Yaakov was. Now, the reason why I wanted to tell you this piece is because it's going to be similar, that it's going to be change of a status. But that's not the only reason. I never heard this piece from Reb Yaakov. I heard from my father the following thing. And I was already in Israel, so I never asked Reb Yaakov about it, and then he passed away. My father said that Zaidi has a piece that he holds when Mashiach comes, he's going to tell him this piece. So I said, what's the piece? What's the piece of Torah? He says, I don't remember, but it's about an Eved and Ish in Parshas Chayesara. That Reb Yaakov was going to tell Mashiach this piece. Now, it's a little bit strange to me. Why? Because I never knew when Mashiach comes, he's going to sit down and say, okay, Rav Moshe Feinstein, tell me a piece of Torah. Reb Yaakov, tell me a piece of Torah. I didn't get that view from the idea of Mashiach, that all the Gedolim are going to come over to him and they're going to tell him, a shtickle Torah that they made up. It seems a little bit strange to me, but this is what Reb Yaakov said. And this is what my father told me. That Reb Yaakov said if he would live to see Mashiach, he's going to tell him this piece. Now, after we learned the piece, I'm not exactly sure. I think it's a very nice piece, and I think it might actually be emes. It might be emes, this piece. And no one I know notices the Eved and Ish. Did anyone ever see anybody who notices the Eved and Ish? Anyone know about this?
Yeah, there's Rav. You've heard of Rav Elchanan Samet?
Oh my gosh, big time. From the Gush. No?
Yeah, so he has an entire article on this.
On Eved and Ish?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I got to get the article. But he's the type that would notice it, by the way. But it's already 21st century, right? Reb Yaakov said this Dvar Torah many, many years before. I don't remember if it was probably in the 30s or 40s, right? I have to check when he actually wrote it down. But my father had told it to me as if he knew this Dvar Torah is the one he wanted to tell Mashiach, right? So it could be that Rabbi Sabbath would also tell that Dvar Torah to Mashiach, but you have to should I try to get a hold of it online?
I can find it for you. I probably have it in my computer. I'll look for it while we're talking.
Okay, but let's go at least through the 3 pages on the text. Okay, I underlined it, right? At the beginning in chapter Chaf, it says chapter Chaf here, but that doesn't mean anything. In chapter Chaf Gimel, maybe this is already chapter Chaf Daled. I can't see because it got cut off. The psukim got cut off for me, but in page Lamed Aleph, right? Va'avram zaken bo bayomim, right? It starts talking about the shidduch. Avram beswears Eliezer that he shloti kachisha livni bnos haknani. Okay, and in pasuk Hey, right, that I underlined Eved and Ulai, right? Vayomer love ha'Eved, right? And then in pasuk Vav, in pasuk Tes, Vayosem ha'Eved, and in pasuk Yud, Vayikach ha'Eved, right? Next page, in pasuk Yud Zayin, Vayoretz ha'Eved, I have it underlined, and then all of a sudden Chaf Aleph, Va'ish, Chaf Beis, Vayikach ha'ish, Chaf Vav, Vayikor ha'ish, Chaf Tes, Vayoretz Loven ha'ish, right? In pasuk Lamed, right? Ko diber elai ha'ish vayavo el ha'ish, right? and pasuk lamed beis vayavo ha'ish, right? And then again in pasuk in the last page at the end of the story, right? All of a sudden in chapter Chav Daled Nun Aleph, Nun Beis, Vayikika Shama Eved Avram, Vayotzea Eved, pasuk Nun Gimel, right? So again, he sort of goes back to Eved again after he's ish for many psukim. Okay, that's the discussion Reb Yaakov's going to have, and he's going to try to answer al pi pshat why there's a change over here. He gives a very interesting answer. I guess we'll have to do that next week already. We'll already do it next week. Any questions about what I said?
Sure.
The Pashup shot of the Eved and Ish, just whether you're contrasting him to Avram Avinu or contrasting him to Beit Lavan?
In other words, with regard to Beit Lavan, he's called an Ish, and with regard to
He's chashuv there, and he's not chashuv against Abraham. You have to see if exactly the subdivision works, but that's what I'd always assumed was the simple shot.
In other words, you had the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's very bolate from the Pesukim.
Right, exactly. Well, it says in Pasuk Yuzay, Vayoretz ha'eved likrata, right? And then all of a sudden it says Va'ish mishta'ela, right? So when does the change take place exactly?
Exactly why that's right,
why is it? I hear your idea. For sure, but I'm not exactly sure where Reb Yaakov is going to claim he could show exactly where the change takes place and where it takes place back to Evan. Okay, that's the idea. Any other questions, guys?
So is this something that's not written up? You're saying
it's in the I have the piece from the Chumash, right?
No, I mean in Rav Yaakov it's not written up.
In Emes Yaakov it's written up.
Oh, on the Torah.
Yeah, on the Torah. That's what I gave you. I have two sheets here, and on the Torah, Kuf Lamed Daled and Kuf Lamed Hey in Bereshis, right? Okay. It's written up, but I had never seen it from Reb Yaakov in his lifetime. In other words, they found it in his writings, but I never asked Reb Yaakov because I first heard about this Dvar Torah when I was already in Israel, and my father said it to me, and he says, I don't remember exactly what Reb Yaakov said, but it has to do with Parshas Chayesara and Eved Ish. That's the one he wants to tell. And I couldn't figure out after I read this exactly why this Dvar Torah, as opposed to many others, did he want to tell this to Mashiach.
Okay, right? So in the meantime, I found the article of Rav Yochanan Samet. In my computer, I have an English version, which I posted on the WhatsApp group.
Good, great.
I just want to say, all of Rav Yochanan Samet's articles, if you read them in the Hebrew, there's much more detail and footnotes and in other words, it's in one of his books. I can tell you which book it's in. I'll
okay, if you can get it for me in the Hebrew, I wouldn't mind reading in the Hebrew.
Yeah, and a lot of his articles in his books, at least until a few years ago, they appear mamish as Word documents that you can download from the VBM of the Gush website. I'll try and find it.
I see.
I'll try and find it. But
great.
Least until a few years ago, mamish, you could download the entire article as it appears in the book with the footnotes and everything.
Interesting. Because I don't have any of his form, but I probably should. What he has on the Torah?
He has 3 volumes on the Torah.
Wow.
3 sets.
In other words, he has 3 volumes. Every parsha, he has an article.
And it's all parshanut?
Pardon?
It's all like parshanut in the text.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I heard him speak a couple of times. I saw he's a very parshanut type of person. Right?
So he has three volumes that were printed, but he has many more articles besides those 3 volumes that were. Yeah, I mean if you go onto the website of the Gush, you can find in every single parsha he has at least 5 or 6.
Wow, unbelievable!
He's very prolific. I mean,
I heard that he was very, very great. Max, go ahead.
So in that footnote 515 back in Malachim.
Yeah.
You didn't read the end of it. It seems like that's a big punchline at the end of the footnote about Moshe Rabbeinu.
Okay. So the Max is right. I didn't read that, but the Ibn Ezra already says that Moshe Rabbeinu made a mistake by bringing his wife and kids to Egypt. He says this in Shmos over there when Moshe Rabbeinu goes back to Egypt. The Ibn Ezra says, right, that I told this to Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky, by the way. I'm the one who told it to him, that the Ibn Ezra already says Reb Yaakov's idea, because the Ibn Ezra says that Moshe made a mistake by bringing his wife, and he says you can make a mistake also because you see that Nassan made a mistake, right? His lashon is Vehevi Rav Avram ben Ezra Hochacha Minassan Hanavi David Hamelech Sheim Ein Navi Misnab Nevuah Olu Litos. If it's not a nevuah, he can make a mistake. That's what the Ibn Ezra brings this pasuk as a raya. Actually, a raya that Moshe Rabbeinu could also make a mistake if it's not a nevuah. Once it's a nevuah, a malagid, it's definitely correct. But it's not a nevuah. Moshe Rabbeinu is das Torah, makes a mistake, and does, and he brings his kids to Egypt, even though it was better that he shouldn't, right? It's not a nevuah that has to be true, right? He says shechoshev lavi ishto banav l'mitzrayim, and he says. He only quotes part of the Ibn Ezra over here. You got to see the whole Ibn Ezra, but he clearly says this is a proof from Sefer Shmuel that a Navi can make a mistake. If it's not B'Torah's Navi, it's B'Torah's Talmud Chacham. By the way, I want to tell you something. We have another 3 minutes. I just reminded myself. Rabbi Aryeh Levine, Zichrono Livracha, the famous tzaddik of Yerushalayim, right, had a son-in-law. I can't remember how you pronounce his name. It's something like Pilichowski. Okay, he had a son-in-law here. Okay, in Yerushalayim, who had a koilel in right off of Rehov Betzalel. And I went to see him. I don't remember if I went to see him a few times or one time. I don't remember, but I went to see him. He was quite a big Talmud Chacham. He was a Slabodka. And I asked him how he was saved from Lithuania. He was learning in Slabodka before the war. What made it? And then he came to Israel. He was a young man, and then he became Aryeh Levine's son-in-law. By the way, he became, Reb Elyashiv was also Rabbi Aryeh Levine's son-in-law. They were both his sons-in-law. Okay, so I asked him the following question. I asked him, "How are you saved from World War II?" And he started to laugh. Listen to what he said. He said that he was sitting, waiting to speak to the Kovner Rav, right? Rav Avram Shapiro, the Var Avram, he was known because he has a sefer called Var Avram, a Lumdish sefer. And he was waiting to speak to him. He was a kid. He was a teenager. And 3 wealthy people come in, right? And he takes them right away to speak to them. And he overhears them asking, this is I think it was 1938, okay? He says, we have papers that we can get out of Lithuania and go to America. What should we do? This is what Rabbi Levine's son-in-law tells me, okay? And he's sitting and listening. And the Kovner Rav says the following thing. He says, the Gemara says in Baba Basra that a Chacham is wiser than a Navi. Chacham adif mi Navi. He's better than a Navi. So the Dvar Avram asks, how could it be a Chacham better than a Navi? So he says, because a Navi is a Navi only when he speaks Nevuah. A Chacham is a Chacham even when he keeps quiet. That's what he answered. Okay? Meaning, the Aryeh Levine's son-in-law, Pilichowski, understood, right, that he can't say, a Chacham is a Chacham even when he keeps quiet. He can't really say, because he doesn't want to panic out Lithuania, but you should leave. And they left. And he left too. He said, I got out of there as soon as I heard him say this. And I was saved, and all of my chaverim were killed. I decided I'm going to leave, and nobody was leaving, but I was going to leave. And that's how I got saved. So
why wasn't the Kovner Rav willing to say it outright?
I think he didn't want to cause panic. I'll tell you why. Because people couldn't get out by 1938. So it would just be a panic. Wealthy people were able to buy themselves out. How he got out, he didn't exactly tell me, but he told me that it wasn't easy. Okay? So that's what he said. Chacham adif minavi, because a chacham is a chacham even if he keeps quiet. A navi is a navi only when he talks. Okay, we'll stop here, guys. We'll take it up next week.